Warm greetings, everyone. My name is Dorothy Guerrero, and welcome to Global Justice Now's interview series, Southern Perspective on the Coronavirus Pandemic. The continuing spread of COVID 19 is increasingly exposing the deep and multiple weaknesses and failures of the corporate and finance capital dominated globalized world we live in. Decades of neoliberal and austerity policies resulted to the decimation of public health systems and basic services in many countries, which made the majority vulnerable to crises like coronavirus. On top of that, lockdowns around the world disrupted global and national supply chains of essential goods and services. The World Bank warned in June that the pandemic would push 60 million people into extreme poverty this year. We started this informational and educational interview series to present internationalist viewpoints on how COVID 19 is playing out in different societies and to highlight the visions and alternatives from social movements in the global south. Through this, we hope to get a first hand understanding of the possibilities being shaped from social activism and progressive processes they are building. In this interview, our focus is Indonesia, Southeast Asia's largest economy. It is also the worst affected country among the member states of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, followed by the Philippines. I am talking to Hertanti, Director of Indonesia for Global Justice, or IGJ. She has been working on trade and economic justice for 11 years now. Indonesia for Global Justice is also campaigning for a UN binding treaty on transnational corporations. Hello, Rakmi, how are you?
Hello, Dottie. Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for this time with me today and discussing COVID-19 in Indonesia. Maybe to start with that, apart from the fact that Indonesia is the most affected country in Southeast Asia, what else can you tell us about the situation there? How is it spreading? And
Mhm.
how are the population being affected?
Yeah, because now, as of June, yeah, the government has implemented a new normal policy, actually, followed by the easing of status on a large-scale social restrictions, or we call it lockdown, in several areas such as Jakarta, Surabaya, and other cities. But then after the implementation of this policy, the new normal policy, the number of new cases of COVID-19 in Indonesia continues to grow and now exceed up to more than 1,000 people per day infected by the virus, which previously actually only touched 600 people as the highest number. So I think this is quite contradictory, yeah, where actually the adoptions of the new normal policy is driven more by the economic situations, yeah, that has continued to decline and not based on the considerations of the spread of COVID-19. So we were really disappointed with the governments, because the increasing number, more than 1,000 people per day, is quite high. Yeah.
How long was the lockdown? And
I
is it lifted now completely, or has it been
Not
partially
yet.
implemented?
Not yet. They call it now as the transitions, but it looks like it's not the transitions. It feels like we are in the normal situations. No more lockdown. But yeah, I mean, because no clear policy or a guidance, yeah, from the government, what kind of transitions model that we should adopt, not only in the government institutions, but also in the society. So I mean, this is also a problem because yeah, even the government now try to adopt a new normal policy, but then a lot of problems in the public, yeah, in the publics right now, where people feels that no more virus, is far from the health protocols and everything. So I mean, this has happened a lot, yeah.
And
Uh,
for people who go daily or commute daily to work,
mhm.
um, how do they go about their daily business? Do people wear masks in public places? Is that
Yes,
the normal?
yeah. There is a like a there's like a yeah, like a guidance from the governments that if you uh, have to go to work, you need to use your masks, and then don't forget to use the hand sanitizers and everything. But sometimes people ignore that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this is a problem in our social situations in Indonesia. Low public awareness, but because this is also happened when we are yeah, when we are talking with the people's for example, in lower class people, like people with
Workers or
workers,
yeah.
informal workers, so sometimes they ignore that. Even there is a phenomenon, in Jakarta, yeah, where mostly, for example, like traditional market traders, yeah, or informal workers who really depend on daily income. Uh, uh, yeah, they reject to have rapid tests provided by the governments
Mm.
because they think they're afraid that if later, if the result is positive, they
Mhm.
can no longer work
Yeah, so
because
they will
of,
be
yeah,
forced to stay home.
yeah, to stay in
Yeah.
quarantine.
So
But
when people need to shield themselves and stay home,
mhm,
what are the
mhm.
assistance from the government? Do they receive something? Because
That is
they
also
miss a day of work, so they miss getting any money or salary.
that's also a problem because in many areas, yeah, if you do a self quarantine, you don't have any support from government or local government. So you have to provide your own food. You have to provide your own needs,
Mhm.
without any helps. Even the government have like a social assistance, but it is also very limited because mostly people came from outside Jakarta and work in Jakarta. Their ID actually is not Jakarta's, so
Mhm.
they cannot have the social assistance from the governments in Jakarta. So that's a problem. Like yeah, it's administration's issues. Yeah, when the governments really strict to the rules of if you want to get the social assistance, you should have Jakarta's ID,
Oh,
or
so
you have to get,
yeah,
yeah. So
that's
so
so
that's
that
a
is
problem.
that is actually bias against non-Jakartas or the poor who are outside
Right,
Jakarta and have to travel
correct,
to the capital to work. So
right,
that's not very helpful. So can you
that's
tell
right.
me more now about the government's approach? So apart from um, the fact that that people are back to work, they are going daily on commuting,
Mm-hmm.
and if and people don't have a choice if they are, especially on a daily wage, they have no choice, they have to work. So apart from that, what about in the macroeconomic level? What are the approaches of the government and what you think about that? Because I
Yeah.
read one of the statements of your organization about the omnibus law, for example. What is it about, and why is your organization critical of it?
Yeah, so as you know that COVID-19 has deepened the economic recessions, yeah, faced by Indonesia, which before COVID, actually, the economic slowdown that led to the crisis had occurred quite seriously. Uh, then this makes the focus of the government is more on economic rather on handling the health. So this can be seen from the state budget stimulus allocations. For example, not only from the omnibus bill, but there is a inequality where the state allocation, state budgets allocations mostly allocated to the industrial and other economic sectors rather to the health issues to handling the COVID-19. In the other way, the government's panic on economic crisis also becomes their reasons for accelerating the discussions of the omnibus law to invite more investment for the growth of the national economy. So omnibus law actually is a bill drafted by the government, yeah, to deregulate almost hundreds national regulations only to facilitate foreign investment into Indonesia. Because yeah, we have a problem with the current account deficits where the government believes that there is only one way out, that is only to invite foreign investment come to Indonesia. So they feel that that is a solution for the economic crisis. But in the other way, at present, all Indonesian people's movement are consolidating, yeah, to reject the omnibus law. And today, actually, we took the first major action, yeah, after the lockdown, to reject the omnibus law in the front of Parliament building. That happened today. So the protest against omnibus law is quite wider and spread in all every places in Indonesia, because we see that from our analysis, for example, yeah, on the draft bill, and we found that most of the revised regulations are efforts to harmonize national regulations with the free trade agreements, yeah, to boost Indonesia's trade competitiveness in the global value chains agenda. For example, the deregulations of four laws in agricultural sectors, yeah, such as food law, horticultural law, farmer protections and empowerment law, and sustainable agricultural cultivation system law. These four sectoral laws are being revised due to Indonesia's loss in the WTO dispute against United States and New Zealand related to our food import policies. Another issues that we also see as part of the efforts to harmonize our national regulations into the free trade agreements, actually, the omnibus law has encouraged to revise our patent law. So far, actually, the criticism of large pharmaceutical companies against Indonesian patent law, particularly on Article 20, is quite harsh. So not only from America, but also pharmaceutical companies based in Europe. They are protest to the Article 20 of patent law, yeah, related to the obligations to implement the patents in Indonesia. So in practice, the pharmaceutical companies have patent drug in Indonesia, but most of them not implemented in Indonesia. So this has an impact on the difficulty of the people to access the medicines, especially the generic medicines. Yeah. So we see even the elimination of Article 20 on this patent law in omnibus law will impact to the implementations of compulsory licensing in Indonesia. So making it increasingly difficult for the public in Indonesia to be able to access generic drugs, especially during the pandemic. So there is an implications between the eliminations of Article 20 in our patent law with the implementations of compulsory licensing. So this quite, we feel that because the pressure, yeah, from the foreign pharmaceutical companies to our government to eliminate this Article 20 in our patent law, we feel like that the governments really facilitate the interest of foreign investor through the omnibus bill. So I mean, yeah, once again, multinational corporations will monopolize the markets and productions in Indonesia.
Yeah. Actually, I want to ask a question on on vaccines as well, because I read
Mhm.
3 days ago that the head of research or scientific research of your government mentioned that Indonesia will try to produce your own vaccines. This is prompted by the action of the US President Trump in buying 3 months supply of remdesivir. And I
Yeah.
think it is understandable that governments of many developing countries are now thinking, okay, if that will happen, that rich governments can do that and will have the monopsony or the capacity to buy whatever vaccine or medicine is available, then it is high time that you develop your own vaccine. So what do you think of that move? And do you see how it will also, of course, help your population? And are you supportive of that move?
Well, the idea is good, very good. But if we see, I think a lot of inconsistent of the government policies right now. Yeah. Uh, First, if we want to produce the vaccines, we need to realize that most of the source of the vaccines is the medicines that already have patent. Yeah. And then we don't have the generic one. We need also the government need to pressure the pharmaceutical companies that who own the patent, yeah, at least to implement the compulsory licensing. Like I said previously, yeah, this really inconsistent what the governments do in the omnibus bill by eliminating the Article 20 in our patent law. It will prevent the governments on this idea, how we can produce the vaccine, whether when the source of the vaccines is still patented by the pharmaceutical companies. And the other thing is almost 100% of the raw materials we should import. And this also become a problem because the high demand in the world now to produce the same needs, yeah, to produce vaccines, the same raw materials that we need. This is also prevent us to get the raw materials from other countries. So I mean, yeah, we have a big problem. So not only on the patent issues, but also from the raw materials. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, uh, yeah, for me, it will be great if the governments can really consistent if they want to provide uh, an access of vaccines for all the people in Indonesia. They should uh, uh, they should see that actually uh, how the government can implement the flexibilities on the TRIPS agreement itself. While in the other side, the governments will have a problem when they eliminate the Article 20 in our patent law. So the good idea will become our nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
In the long term, it will be our disaster.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe that uh, the decisions of the governments to create a vaccines, but in the other side they have to follow the directions from the pharmaceutical companies' interests.
Mm-hmm.
We will we will
Yeah.
have very difficult
Yeah.
situations.
Actually, my next question is related to what you mentioned previously as well, apart from this challenge of
Mm.
producing generics and producing your own medicines and vaccines for the use of Indonesian people. When you mentioned that Indonesia is already signatory or members of so many free trade agreements, but then at the same time, your president is interested to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. which is it's already agreed. There's already the treaty. So that means your government or Indonesia could no longer change anything. So you will just be joining it and be a member. So what does IGJ and other, I know that you work with other organizations and movements as part of a broad Indonesia trade justice network. So maybe you can tell us about that network and what does your network or your organization think about Indonesia's joining the TPP?
Mhm. Yeah, well, our struggle, yeah, against the injustice trade policy, yeah, where the government's now uh, trying to push more relations with other regions into free trade agreements. Uh, this is become yeah, from our coalition's perspective, actually the government's plan to sign more free trade agreements, or even if they want to join in the TPP, yeah, it will be inconsistent with what they are planning on the issue of economic growth. For example, if they think the big problems in our economy actually the current account deficits, which contributed by the highest import, yeah. So that is why they think they can solve the problem only to increase export, to boost export by signing a lot of free trade agreements. So uh, it will not become a good solutions, because once you sign free trade agreements, it's not only you want to export to other countries, but other countries will also export to your country, which mean it will create more numbers of import values to our countries, and it will become more deficits into our trade values. So this is really inconsistent what they want to do in the government sides. So not only in the TPP, so we see the mindset of the governments in the free trade agreements, they only see from the export sides without thinking any implications into the uh, uh, regulation side, which mean that once you sign the free trade agreements, you need to harmonize it into your national regulations. But then you have more binding regulations, which where you cannot do anything to your own national interest. So this is for us, for our coalitions. Actually, we trying to talk with them, to the governments about these issues, but because they only see the idea of export become one of the solutions, then
Mhm.
it will not make a good impact to our economic itself.
Yeah.
So actually, not only on because now we are yeah, we have ratified Indonesia Australia, for example. We have signed the Indonesia EFTA CEPA. Now we are negotiating RCEP. We are negotiating the Indonesia EU CEPA, including now they are preparing to discuss Indonesia UK FTA. They already start an initial stage to discuss Indonesia UK FTA. So I think the government of Indonesia right now, they will focusing in the next 3 years to increase more free trade agreements numbers yeah, to be signed by the government. So I mean, this is quite crazy for us, because uh, the signing of FTAs will not give a positive impact to our economic growth, but the impacts is in the other sides. Yeah.
So, well, we can talk a lot about that when the negotiation on the UK Indonesia FTA starts. But I think what I also want to ask at this point is when you said that you talk to your government, you try to lobby and tell them your proposals. What is your main proposal? What is the main alternatives that that IUJ and the network that you work with are telling the government?
Mhm. Yeah. First, the alternative that we propose to the governments actually uh, no alternative besides stop, expand the free trade agreements signed by the governments. Second, we also sometimes use the strategy of red lines provisions under the free trade agreements. For example, if you want to negotiate free trade agreements with other countries, you shouldn't have any agreements on, for example, the ISDS mechanism, or you shouldn't have any commitments on the IPR chapters related with the patent of medicines, and then the issues of seat issues. So we have some red lines, but then uh, we don't see that they really yeah, we don't see that they will follow up our proposals, you know, because uh, the issue of secrecy and transparency and no participations from public becomes a democratic issue, democratizations issue for us, because no consultations that yeah where the government's trying to discuss this with the parliaments or even with the public. So mostly only from the private sector, only from the business sector that can have a space to consult their interests with the governments. So we see that no other choice for us beside we raise the campaign on stop the free trade agreement. So for us, uh, stop FTAs and reclaims our rights, reclaims our economic, and to stop monopoly by the corporations is our big message to the governments right
Mhm.
now with the coalitions. Yeah.
Yeah. The problems that you identified on free trade agreements on ISDS, I mean, there are global campaigns and movements and trade justice networks and groups here in the UK and in Europe are also working on that. So, uh, what do you think is the future for international collaboration campaigning on this issue between Indonesia and those that are also working and share your views on these trade issues? So, do you think that how are we building? How do we? There are already partnerships, but how can we strengthen those internationalist networks and solidarity groups to amplify each other's advocacy?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, as you know that uh, we cannot work by ourselves. So because these trade agreements always related with other countries, yeah, with other groups in other countries. So that is why we think how to give more pressures to the governments to not put a lot of commitments that will jeopardize our peoples. Then for us, a collaborations work between civil society in Indonesia and civil society in other countries. It should be strengthening, and how to bring more people voices in the negotiations process. Yeah, yeah, to bring more people proposals in the negotiations process, and how to ensure that the governments will not put any commitments that only facilitate the corporate interests over the people's interests. So I think it is really important how we collaborate with other peoples in international levels, sharing our knowledge, sharing our experience, yeah, and together we should bring our voices in the same agenda, in the same strategy of campaign and advocacy. So uh, it will give a big results into our struggle.
Rakmi Hantati, thank you very much. And we look forward to work with you more on this issue on ISDS, on FTAs, on the future UK-Indonesia FTA,
Yeah,
or the UN binding treaty on
when it,
transnational corporations. More power to you. Take care,
yeah.
and then I hope to see you soon.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much, Dorothy. Bye bye.